Greg, we are so happy to have you on with us. We wish we were talking about an upcoming Super Bowl
Yes.
matchup right now.
We're lamenting the fact that we've got
we're talking about the offseason.
Yeah, we're lamenting the fact that we all have a free weekend because we were actually making other plans and they fell through. So,
unfortunately, it's nice. I'll probably have a little bit of a free weekend, but I head down to Phoenix on Wednesday because we always shoot the matchup show on site the day before the game. So kind of looking forward to that.
That'll be fun. We also love that you're repping a Bills hoodie.
I did it for you guys.
I appreciate it.
I had to,
Yeah, we probably you got to have a closet full of all 32 teams, though, right? I mean,
I don't actually. I don't.
What?
It's not alphabetical, and you go A.
I don't. But I love this. This is great.
Well, we're neck deep in the off season already.
Yeah.
I know you got to still deal with the Super Bowl, but we're talking about stuff and pending free agents for the Bills. And one of the questions we've got going on has to do with, obviously Tremaine Edmunds, who, he's been polarizing for Bills fans since day one. He's this big, huge physical guy who's in the middle of the defense. The team really loves him. Fans are not enamored with the way or his style of play. But when you ask around other teams covet a guy like him. He'll command a big number on the free agent markup. How important is he specifically to the defense, do you think?
I think players like that are really important. They're not impact players the way fans think of impact players, Steve, because he's not used as a pass rusher very often, so he's not going to have high sack numbers. Rarely in their scheme is he asked to cover tight ends, which is obviously a marquee and a very visible thing. So, he's really an anchor in the middle of the defense, and every team needs one of those players. Now, people can debate whether that player should demand X amount of dollars or not. That's a debate for each and every team. That's a different question. But I think in the context of what they do and what he's asked to do, he does it very well. Is he one of those big-time impact middle linebackers? Is he Luke Kuechly when Luke Kuechly was with Carolina? No, but he's a really solid player, and I bet if you spoke to Leslie Frazier, which maybe you have, he would tell you that he's a really important piece to this defense.
I'm sure it's not as simple as this, but a lot of people are having the conversation of, okay, Tremaine Edmonds is a free agent, and so is Jordan Poyer. So Tremaine Edmonds or Jordan Poyer, you spoke about the impact that Tremaine Edmonds has on this defense. But what about Jordan Poyer? What type of impact does he have this year?
Oof.
He played as one of one kind of in that defense because Micah Hyde was not a part of the defense this season with that injury. But Jordan Poyer was also in and out of the lineup with injuries, but played through a lot of that and proved that when he was on the field, the Bills usually won the game.
Now, I would argue, and again, I always feel like there's things. Well, not I always feel. I know there are things I don't know. That if I was speaking to Leslie Frazier or a defensive coach, that they would tell me things I couldn't possibly know because I'm not part of the process. But I would argue, just based on the NFL today, that Jordan Poyer and that position is ultimately a more important position than Tremaine Edwards. I would make that argument, just based on looking at the whole league. That in today's NFL, that safety position is really, really critical. And Jordan Poyer, to me, is a really solid football player. When Hyde and Poyer are healthy, that's as good a safety tandem as there is in the league. And I think that's really, really important to the success of this defense.
And you talk about other defenders who you kind of the conversation always comes up when a guy like Ed Oliver gets to the end of his rookie deal. How good has he been? Has he met expectations? Certainly, he's the kind of guy who has played a ton of reps and gotten a ton of playing time for the Buffalo Bills. So if he's gone, whether you like him or not, it's a huge void they have to fill. Give us an idea of your thumbnail about Ed Oliver, what he is, what he can be, and how the team uses him, and how what he means to other teams who face him.
Well, it's funny, just to really quickly respond to something you said, which I talk about all the time. So many fans want players, oh, we should get rid of him. And that's always easy to say, Steve, as you know, but then you got to line someone else up. And,
Right.
and it's always not that easy. But I think here would be the question about Ed Oliver, who I think has played overall pretty well and certainly has shown flashes of being, a dynamic, explosive interior player. But I think when you draft a defensive tackle early on in the draft, which he was a top 10 pick, was he not, if memory serves me correctly?
Yeah, he was
Yes,
drafted
he's
ninth overall.
Ninth overall, yeah.
Yeah. I think in today's NFL, when you draft a defensive tackle, an interior defensive lineman in the top 10, what you're expecting is high caliber pass rush. And one could have that serious debate as to whether he has done that in his career. Now, he's had moments for sure, and he's a very good run defender. He's always been viewed as that classic 3 technique, 1 gap player, which is the way they play their fronts. They predominantly play over fronts, which means the 3 technique is to the strong side of the offensive formation. Sometimes he'll be a 1 technique, but he's a gap player. That's what he is, because he's got great quickness off the ball and great explosiveness off the ball, and we've seen that throughout the years. But the big question is, how do you ultimately feel about him as a pass rusher? And I think in the minds of many, and the tape tells you this as well, that's where it's been kind of erratic. You'd like to see him, again, sacks are not the be-all and end-all. It's not as if he has to have 18 sacks. But the question is he a consistent enough pass rusher for what you need at that position?
And the conversation with him has been, when he takes on double teams, he kind of disappears in the lineup, or you don't see that production that you would want out of Ed Oliver, even when he's taking on double teams. But when Von Miller got hurt and was out of that defensive line rotation, what was the difference with and without Von Miller in terms of the defensive line pressuring the quarterback?
Maddie, that was in many ways a major deal with the season, because Von Miller is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL and has been for years. And they did not have that guy. They did not have a great 4-man D-line pass rush once Von Miller left. They had moments. Every team has moments, but he was really the catalyst. And this is not a high percentage blitz defense. Do they blitz? Yes. And one thing they like to do is what we call 4-man zone exchange pressures, where they drop out a defensive lineman and they add in usually Milano as the 4th rusher, but it's still a 4-man rush. They're not a big 5-man rush defense. They're certainly not a 6-man zero coverage defense. So, I think when you lose Von Miller, you really lose that edge rusher. And not only that, guys, but it totally changes how offenses play against you. Von Miller has to be accounted for, particularly in certain situations. They did not have anybody on the edge who needed to be accounted for in that way.
Yeah, and no question, when he went down in the Thanksgiving game, certainly the Bills' defense changed. And I think you're right. The way offenses viewed the Bills' defense dictated different attack methods, and the Bills, had to deal with that. And certainly they were on a 7-game winning streak at the end of the season, but, they were winning a lot of games by a single point. Now, let's flip it over to the other side of the football. The conversations we've been having with our listeners and our fans and the feedback we've been getting, and we've been putting it out there as well, the Bills need to upgrade and get a more dominant offensive line and more weapons for Josh Allen. So it sounds like they really struggled offensively. Well, they were number 2 in yards and number 2 in points. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good year they had. But there always was times when it looked like they short-circuited. What are your thoughts on the Bills' offense going forward? Is it is it personnel? Is it scheme? Is it drops? And certainly turnovers were a big issue.
You know what, Steve? It's kind of an enigma wrapped in a riddle here, because you nailed it. They score a lot of points. But I think if you really study on film, as I do, their offense, the things you said are absolutely true. The offensive line needs to be upgraded. It's I would say that it's probably, in terms of talent, average to below average. And I personally believe they have a great O-line coach in Aaron Cromer. So I think they need more talent. I think in terms of weapons, yes, they need more weapons. Really, other than Diggs, who did you feel you could count on a week-to-week basis? And then the run game, this is a Ken Dorsey question and probably a whole organizational question, is what is the run game going to be? To me, watching tape, I almost felt like the run game was a case where, hey, we need to run the ball now, so let's hand it off because we have to throw in a few runs here and there. And if it happened to work in that given game, maybe they'd run it a little more. But I didn't feel like there was a strong marriage or connection between the run game and the pass game. As I think I've said to you, and Maddie, you weren't, I don't think you were on when I said this, it's very hard to live with let Josh be great every single week. And Josh is great. And we all got mesmerized, myself, I think everybody, by what he did in the 2 playoff games last year. And we started to think he was going to play that way every single week. And that's really, and Steve, you know this, you played with a Hall of Fame quarterback. That's hard to do every single week in the NFL. And, you need other ways to win besides your quarterback just being great every single week.
Yeah, and I'll just say this, we always had the conversation week in, week out. You figure you're going to get Diggs, and the other team was going to focus on him.
Yeah.
And Bills fan, and this is an illustration of what Bills fans felt. Gosh, I hope Gabe Davis has a good matchup this week, or I hope Isaiah McKenzie has a game this week, or I hope, Khalil Shakir has a game this week.
Right.
We never had this like I don't care if they can take Diggs away because we'll kill him with C.D. Lamb, or we'll kill him with T.
Right.
Higgins, or we'll kill him with the other guy. And the Bills were looking for that guy.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. And I just the run game to me is, and again, I'm not suggesting that the run game, that become the foundation of the offense. I'm not suggesting they morph into the Titans, and give it to one back 25 or 30 times. But, there are times just in given games where you need to line up and run the ball. How many times this year, Steve and Maddie, did we see the Bills being ahead by maybe even it was one score, close games, went ahead late third quarter, early fourth quarter, where you'd like to be able to line up, run the ball, eat a little clock, maybe you mix in a play action pass, and they would come out and throw 3 straight passes, and they'd punt, and literally 30 seconds would go off the clock.
Right. Too many times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you have an offense like that where you want to be able to go to the run game to take time off the clock and to really control the entire game in the clock, you look to a player who hopefully can maybe grow into a bigger role next season in James Cook, who could be involved in the run game and the passing game. We saw flashes of what he could do down the stretch and how he could be effective, but that consistency isn't there yet. Hopefully it is in year number 2 for him. But how much of a leap and how big of a role do you think he's capable of taking on within this offense based on what you saw this season from him?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Maddie. I mean, my guess is no one would see him as a quote-unquote true foundation back. In other words, a guy that you're going to give the ball to 250, 270 times. And as I said, I don't think, even though I believe the run game needs to be a more significant part of this offense, are they ever going to be a true run-first team where everything works off the run game? So I think in that context, Cook could be a number 1 back. I think he has the traits to do that. Because you're not going to ask him, like I said, to have 22, 25 carries every week. And he really does give you a lot in the pass game. And he certainly got more playing time toward the end of the season. You started to see, the reasons he was drafted in the 2nd round. And I think a lot of people had him as a player who would be drafted there. So I think he's an important player as they move forward. And it's an important offseason for how they decide they want to deploy him next year.
We're talking about now at this time of the year, there's been some changes going on. Certainly the New England Patriots, everybody was hooting about the quality of their offense, and they had a couple of defensive guys calling plays over there, and Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. Joe Judge, former head coach and special teams coordinator, and it did not go well. So they went back and got Bill O'Brien, brought another former coach on the staff back for a second stint. Mac Jones, what did you see from Mac Jones? Certainly it was a little bit of a regression from his rookie year, which is surprising to a lot of people. But how do you think this marriage is going to go between Bill O'Brien and Mac Jones in this Patriot offense?
I would expect it to go pretty well. I've been fortunate enough to get to know Bryce Young a little bit, and I asked Bryce Young about Bill O'Brien, and he loved him. He said, "I love Bill O'Brien. I love everything about the way he coaches." So, I would expect that to go well. Bill O'Brien, as you know, Steve, has been doing this for a long time. He's had a lot of success in the league. Things went south in Houston, not because of what he did as a coach, but because they had that whole issue with the front office and, who should pick the players and who's the GM. Those are separate issues. That's not a factor now, but he was there with Brady for 3 or 4 years. He did a really good job in Houston with their offense. He did obviously a really good job at Alabama. He was the one actually at Penn State when Christian Hackenberg had the one great year as a freshman. So, this guy has done a really, really good job with quarterbacks, and I would expect that to go well. I would expect Mac Jones, who from everything I understand, and I'm sure you've heard the same thing, I think Mac Jones wants to be coached hard. I think he's that kind of kid, and I think Bill O'Brien is that guy.
Another team in the AFC East who added another big name at a coaching position is the Miami Dolphins. They add Vic Fangio as their defensive coordinator, and this is a team who the Bills duked it out with this season. They went 1-1 in the regular season, ended up beating them in the playoffs by just 3 points, but these games always came down to the wire this season for the Bills, and I think we're expecting that going forward as the Miami Dolphins continue to get better. Do you think Vic can help the Dolphins defense in the way that he's ran things before with different teams?
Yes, and I think the defense will look different, and they'll have to study it hard because coaches coach against coaches, Maddie, as you probably now know. And Vic Fangio's defense is different than what they were playing prior. They played a lot of man with a lot of pressure, and not that Vic doesn't play man or doesn't pressure ever, but his defense is not built foundationally around those two things. So it'll be a different defense that the Bills will have to prepare for in the division. Vic does disciples throughout the league, so they've certainly played against a Vic Fangio style defense before, but now that it's in your division and you want to win those 2 division games, you really have to study that in great, great detail.
I'm going to ask you about the San Francisco 49ers. They're stuck in a weird place. You hardly ever see this. Their quarterback situation. Trey Lance, who started the season, got hurt. Jimmy Garoppolo took over, started playing well, and got hurt. Then Brock Purdy, who was Mr. Irrelevant, 7th-round draft pick. Nobody expected him to even take a snap or even be able to play. Won 7 games for him to finish the year and got him to the championship game, and got hurt. What move is there for the Niners here, and which one do you think in a vacuum, which guy's the better guy for them going forward?
Well, Trey Lance will be the guy. And, obviously they traded up to get him, Steve, and he's been there now for 2 full years. So he's going to get the shot. I think in an overall, if you're just looking at what each guy could do at his best, and, we don't know about Trey Lance, but at his best, Lance gives you a more talented player. But unfortunately, the sample size is so small, we don't know. But in a sense, this is what they were waiting for, Trey Lance to be given the opportunity. Hopefully he stays healthy. And if he can reach that level, then Brock Purdy will probably be the backup as well as he played. And by the way, down the last couple of games, not counting the NFC Championship game when he didn't play that many snaps, Purdy started to show a couple of things that were probably a little concerning for Kyle Shanahan. Maybe things that could be corrected, but things that would have had to have been corrected. But Trey Lance just is a more talented quarterback than Brock Purdy.
Another young quarterback and a team who has to figure out what they're doing at the quarterback position is the New York Giants and Daniel Jones. Looking for deserving a long-term contract. Yep. I mean, what he did with the Giants, 9-7 is their regular season record. They beat the Vikings in that first round of the playoffs, and unfortunately don't make it beyond that. I think some of us were looking forward to watching what the Giants could do because Brian Daboll and Joe Shane are over there, who used to be with the Bills. Several former Bills players also on that roster. Do you think Daniel Jones is the right fit long-term for the New York Giants based on the offense that they have? I mean, with Saquon Barkley, I know that's also a question mark up in the air for him being a part of the Giants long-term as well.
Well, they'll sign Daniel Jones, Matty, because the bottom line is this is a great example of what we were talking about earlier. Some people might say, oh, Daniel Jones, he's not a great quarterback. Well, there's not a lot of great transcendent quarterbacks. They don't fall out of the sky. You got to line up and play. And Daniel Jones now, who's a smart kid, has a year in Brian Dable's system, and he'll just get better. And the one thing that stood out is as the year progressed, they started to give Jones a little more freedom. They asked him to throw the ball more. Early in the year, they really were not doing that. This offense became much more Daniel Jones based than Saquon Barkley based. And I know he's a free agent as well. My guess is if they had to prioritize, they would prioritize Daniel Jones over Saquon Barkley because Jones will continue to get better in the context of this offense. He throws the ball well. He's got movement ability. Just because he's never going to be Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Joe Burrow or a Justin Herbert, that doesn't mean you can't line up and play and win with Daniel Jones.
Greg, it's Super Bowl week coming up. Enjoy your time. I know you're going to go out to Arizona, so enjoy, travel safely, and thanks for being with us.
Oh, thanks, guys. Always appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Greg. Good talking with you.